we record and archive broadcasts, and that's a beautiful thing. So,
Okay.
thanks, Facebook.
Hello, people.
How is everybody
My
today?
husband's on. I see Heather Lowy and JT, and hello, Jude.
Hi.
And I don't know.
Hi.
Hello.
It looks like we're good on Facebook. So hey,
It says so. Nice.
I love
it. I think there's like a little delay on it, which I noticed when I tested it yesterday. So
don't have both windows open, or you'll create like
I
a
know.
weird time vortex rift type situation.
yeah.
Cool.
Oh, no problem, Heather. In fact, when we start, I'll make sure everybody's muted and stuff. So that way we don't have any background noise or anything. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Good. After this, I just found out the state park is open, the cornfield, and Heidi Duckler is doing something, and Snezhana has something.
It's
So I'm
a
gonna head
very
over.
cool. So you are gonna love this. Okay, so I might go by tomorrow. I haven't decided. So they normally do a dance festival with site-specific installations in some place, in like, for example, the State Historic Park. So they couldn't do, for all the reasons, the thing where 100 people show up at once to watch a performance, right?
Yeah.
But what they did is they figured out an AR situation on an app. So you go there, and then when you're there, you watch it through your viewfinder, and you see the dance in the thing happening, but in the thing you're looking at. So it's augmented reality.
Oh, cool.
Very cool.
And it sounds so cool. So I'm going to try to check it out tomorrow or tonight. I think the park's open till sunset, right?
Now, where is this?
It's like 7:30. It's
The park over by
China.
that used to be the cornfield, that by Lauren Bond Studios.
Yeah, I didn't even know they were open. I was like, if I would have known, I would go walking there more. I'm like so happy that they're open.
Yeah. So that should be pretty good.
Yeah. Cool.
Maybe I'll see you there, but from like 10 feet away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, shall we get started? I'm sure we'll have more people kind of.
Sounds good.
In. Yeah. And just if you guys can mute yourself, and I'll mute you if you don't know how, just so there's no background noise and stuff while everybody's talking. Thank you so much for being here. We're here because Karen Hochman Brown has a solo show.
La la la.
Yeah. Were you testing that, Heather? I don't know what she was doing. We're here because Karen has a solo show at Alhambra City Hall Art Gallery, which of course nobody can really, well, you can see if you
can.
You can see it, but there's no reception or anything.
No.
But it's open Monday through Friday, or it's open 2 more days, Monday and Tuesday, like 8 to 5, regular.
8 to noon.
Oh,
7 to noon. 7 to noon.
Oh, okay, 7 to noon. And Tuesday's the last day. So stop in and see the show. You'll see installation shots here also during the talk. And it's a beautiful show. This is the work that when Karen first started working with us as Shoebox, this is like what she brought to us, and it was just gorgeous. You know, we talked about how Karen created the work, and which you guys will talk about more later, but just, you know, the programming that Karen did, and, you know, it was really exciting. So, and then of course, everything else Karen's done after that has just, you know, her career has evolved and her practice has evolved, and it's been really exciting to see. But it's wonderful to see that the work is still out there, especially this work. So with that, we are here also with Shana Nys Dambrot, who Los Angeles art critic, editor of LA Weekly, gosh, what else? Freelance art writer for Art and Cake, of course. And you know, there's so much more I can say, but thank you so much, Shana, for being here with Karen. It's always a pleasure to hear you talk, and so I'm sure this will be such a fun conversation. And then with that, I guess I will let the both of you take it over.
Oh, cool. Well, I'll start for a second, and then we're mostly here to hear from Karen, and I have different questions. And I mean, for those of you who've known me, it's like I'm in that headspace where like I have so many different things, and I wish that I could just say them like all at once instead of having to pick a place to start. But just by way of introduction to, you know, how we're going to talk about this today, I don't always ask artists about how they make work, but I agree with you in so many ways, Christine, that in this particular case, I think it's actually quite salient to discuss the process. So we are definitely going to talk about sort of like, and that's where we'll start, will be sort of like, what are we looking at, you know, in that way. But I just want to say that other than just like the general idea that I'm psyched to do the show, I think a couple things, one of which is that this work happens to be work that is so sort of luminous and graphically tight and grabby that seeing it online in this instance, and we have some really beautiful slides, which we'll start sharing of the work in a minute, is sort of okay. I mean, you want the scale, you want the atmosphere, all the reasons. We just went to 6 galleries. I went to about 6 galleries in the last couple of days, and I'm here to confirm, yes, in fact, it is still a very different experience, in case you've forgotten. But I am happy to see that this work really does look beautiful on a screen, because it already has this like almost lightbox quality, even, you know, just in the prints. So I feel like that'll be okay, and I can't wait for everybody to get a look. And also the space itself where it's installed is super crazy. So I'm looking forward to, you know, show you guys just being able to see it also. But I did want to say, and then so after we talk about sort of, we'll show some of the work in a minute, and then we'll talk about how it's done, because I know, but how it's done and what it is are something that is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is this idea of the hybrid of the sort of organic and the technological. And so for all the reasons, like how much of our life has been put online lately, but how much of that was already happening, obviously, for decades, slowly, but now we're all very engaged with that. We're thinking, you know, very much about kind of like the future and all the technology that's coming in, and tossing around words like, you know, cyborg and whatever. And so I'm really interested in the way that this work combines absolutely organic, fractal forms of reproduction with this intervention of technology and computer code and things like that. Like, that's the part that I'm most obsessed with. Although there are other factors, things like mandalas and the subconscious and things like that. There's a lot in the work, but that's kind of like how we'll go. And then we'll talk a little bit. And then I guess the best way to do it is if you have a question, to put it in the chat, and, you know, one of the three of us will try to keep an eye on that and, you know, sort of make sure. Or you can always like flag us down to unmute you if it's too much to type. Okay, so that's the shape of that. And then, like I said, we'll have questions. So I guess like I would love to sort of start there with you, Karen, talking a little bit about, I mean, you can tell already in the title, Geometric Botanical, that you are proceeding with that kind of hybridized level of perception of this. So I and everyone I think would just love to hear like how this started. Was it like botanical photography, but then computers? Do you love computers? But like how, just like, what are we looking at? And maybe if it's easy to share a few of the images while you're talking.
Sure,
And speaking of technology, of all of us, Karen is actually the one that really understands. There we are, see? Sorry to make you do double duty, talking and running the flight deck. But
no problem. I like being in charge of the graphics. So this is Botanic Geometry. This is Alhambra City Hall. So it's a hangar. And
it looks like the old Marciano lobby. I mean, it's a really crazy space.
Yeah, they have this rail there that I had to figure out how to hang everything so that it wasn't just right on the rail, so I could make it look professionally installed. And I think I did a pretty good job and found some kind of new ways to hang things. It's nice discovery. But let's start, let's see. There we go. So the show, the way I have it hung this time, there are 4 different segments because there's a desk in the middle of one wall and there's a bulletin board in the middle of the other wall. So I've broken this down into 4 segments. This wall, these are all florals. These are all flowers, and I can start there. So I don't know what you want me to, how did you want me to start?
I mean, I guess, just so I'm looking at this and I want to know like what I'm looking at in the sense of like, what are the sort of ratios between photography and digital imagination,
Sure.
and that, like how it's built to see what to end with what we're seeing.
So this piece, in all of these pieces I've used, except with the exception of one, I've used one photograph. And each photograph I distort and reflect them in a program that's charmingly called Artmatic. But it's a very deep program that I use a tiny corner of for this. And first I find a flower that I love. My mother was a flower collector. Her garden had all sorts of crazy succulents, and between her and my grandmother, they'd always find the black flowers and the brown flowers, and my mother just loved roses. She must have had 40 rose bushes when we were growing up. This is a Chinese fringe flower, and it was taken from the image was taken from a private home. So I'll take the image, I do this distortion and reflection, and then put everything back into Photoshop and take my layers, mask them, layer them. I will add shadows and highlights and different ways to give it a real 3D pop. And then it's really kind of all about just balancing the different shapes and curating from the different layers that I've created until I'm done.
So the palette, for example, I think that's one of the reasons that it's such a cognitive kind of puzzle, is because although it presents in this digital way, the palette is specifically derived from like a nature walk, like a flower in your life. And so so I think that's part of it. Like a lot of the organic quality comes from the colors. So you're manipulating it a lot, but not that way. Like in other words, right. Okay.
Correct. It is very rare that I do any color correction. I might do a little bit of sharpening and the like before I begin manipulation. The program I use has a tendency to change the colors a little bit if I don't have my settings right. So I may have to go back and change them once I get back to Photoshop. But I really am pretty much, in this one specifically, every single pixel that is there was from the original photograph. I don't add to there. Well, I'm going to get to the next one where I do add. When I started this whole project, I was coming out of working with Judaic art, and everything I was doing was in 6-pointed stars. So for my first 11 pieces in this series, I had rules. They were all 6-pointed stars. They were all going to have these dots on them. And those I did add. I think my original rule is they were all going to have a piece of the original photograph as part of them. So you can see this one, the tendrils, all these tendrils here have not been distorted. I've simply masked them. I think it looks like there's a little bit of beveling on there, so they kind of pop out a little bit more. And then I just find things. We start reflecting things, and I find these guardians and goddesses and altars and just these different shapes that sort of tug at me. Cathedral arches and all sorts of different things. And then I'll get a whole bunch of different pieces together, and again, curate from them, figure out what works and where I want to add something to get the balance until I'm happy with it. And part of it's also playing around with some of the different effects that I can do in Photoshop. I'm not using filters at all, but I'm using a lot of what they call layer effects. So those are your bevelings, your shadows, highlighting.
And so that's where that like almost illusionistic 3D.
Right here, this one, it is beveled downward, so it looks like it could hold water, whereas this is beveled the other direction, so where water would flow off of it.
I really see the figures in this one too. Like now that you've said that, I cannot unsee them. I mean,
yeah, I don't actually like to talk too much about what I have seen in my images because I don't want to necessarily lead the viewer to what they should be seeing. I'm hoping that they're seeing what I'm seeing. I find, we're talking flowers, and this is the reproductive parts of plants. So there are lots of vulvas. There are lots of insects. When you buy symmetry something, you get eyes, so they're faces. And just playing with those things, and particularly when if anything looks like a face, I like my faces to look happy. But I had a friend who was a little bit of a Eeyore, and I would look at the top and the face would be happy, and then it's reflected at the bottom and the smile is a frown. So she would always see them frowny. But here are just a couple of, we were actually talking about these things where I had the one piece that looks like it's holding water, and then some of these, what I feel is some sort of sacred imagery that I find. This piece here, this is one of the larger pieces I've done. It's 36 inches. And it's just an explosion of all sorts of things. I fell in love with this part here, this yellow. When I started doing the reflecting, it sort of looked like a ribbon exploding. And then again, more vulvas and passages, and this was another
one. Definitely, maybe it's just because Christine, but that to me also has like a definite like royal confectionery quality to it as well. Yeah, there's a lot. And so I love I just want to pause and then go back to that to highlight what you said a second ago, which is that you find things in the image. And I just want to like shine a quick spotlight on that use of the word find, because of course you are making it in collaboration with this, rambunctious program that you're using, wrong or whatever, right?
And what nature has to give me.
Right. And so, but I love the idea that like, even though you are the one controlling the field, that your experience is that you're discovering things in there as you go. And I wanted to just pause on that for a second, because I feel like that's exciting, because that I think kind of like foreshadows the person who's then going to come to the work and start finding things in it. So I just felt like there's a nice symmetry there. So I wanted to just, shine a light on that for a second. But yes, please keep going.
Sure. Again, these are some of my little favorite parts when as I find these things, like, ooh, I've got to do something with it. And the fun of it is figuring out how to put all these puzzle pieces together so that it's busy enough, but not too busy, that there's some sort of flow, that the essence of the flower comes through. This one was...
yeah, when you get up into the details and you can start to see some of the effects, it actually starts to read a little bit like that painted quality, old-timey botanical, Dutch botanical paintings, and like the little details like that. When you take it out of the pattern and you just look at like one part, that to me, if somebody told me that was just a macro lens photograph of a detail from a Dutch still life, like I would believe that. So that's interesting as well to note really how tiny the pieces that you're working with can be. Like those little details and the ones that are like hidden inside there, kind of in the shadow. I mean, it's a really effective dimensionality.
Well, thank you. In this case particularly, like, oh, God, stop clicking my, getting ahead of myself. All of the shadowing there is from the photograph. So I feel like I'm collaborating with nature and with the computer, and with the computer programmer. I did not design these programs. So I'm really working with somebody else's creation. Well, I'm working with, if we're going for the, you know, the G word, right? I don't the, you know, nature. We're going from mother nature. I'm collaborating with so many people, which is, it's been kind of fun, Christine, doing these collaboration things, because it's fun collaborating with a human. But the work that I do really does feel like a collaboration. I could not do this whatsoever without the help of nature, without the, you know, digital cameras. This couldn't happen. So it's a lot of, you know, so I'm doing a lot of play with this, and it's I just have a lot of fun. This piece,
I think that dynamic is great, that there's a playfulness, because it's also so precise and like labor intensive, right? That like you could be forgiven for thinking that this is like a meticulous, crazy making process, right? But actually there's a lot of joy and energy in it. And so it's good to hear that that is actually in there. Like that is your experience of working this way.
Speaking of meticulous, trying to figure out how to do this weaving, I ended up with these big green shapes, and I've done some actual weaving in my life. I've worked with the loom. I've done crochet. I'm quite the maker, at least in my past life. So trying to kind of replicate some of those things digitally has been fun and challenging, and getting this weaving to happen was very educational.
It's like the computer can help you with things like mirroring or whatever. Mm-hmm. But when it's time to actually construct something like this, it seems like it's almost, I was going to say, it seems almost like you still had to physically do it almost, or like, you know, the equivalent of physically doing it to make the two threads right.
It's all, it's with the masking, and instead of using an X-Acto knife and yes paste, I'm using my digital stylus and playing, you know, just working at trying to get what I'm looking for.
I love this one too, because the edges are not crisp. I mean, you know, like visually they are, but you know, they're wonky like leaves, right? It's not a perfect green arc. It's like, you know, so it has even more of that organic. And this is like, yeah, see what I mean? Like the, you know, the way that the blades of the green kind of dip a little bit, and that also enhances that organic aspect of what's being brought.
Yeah, I like to exploit those aspects of the image whenever I can get that texture from the image. I feel like I found the right elements. I'm just going to finish up on the flowers with this crazy piece here. This one's tiny. This one's small. This one's 20 by 20, and it's got so many weird things going on with it.
Just the title. Can we make sure everybody takes a moment and reads the title of this piece, Begonia of the Valkyries? I think that just says so much about the aesthetic that you're having. Yeah, because it does. I mean, it's a very, very regal, epic piece, and yet.
As I was creating this one, that was the dun, 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 dun. It was all that I could think of in my head. So it had to be, and the base image is a begonia flower, of course. But yeah, this is, I don't know. I have probably about 5 different versions of this one, and this is the one that won. Spent a lot of time.
It has a little bit of a sharpness, the way that those fronds have a kind of a fang or teeth, harpy vibe. Like I now can hear Wagner in my head as well. Like I absolutely see, even though it's the prettiest dusty pink, that this is like, that there's some potential for danger and maybe violence, like there's just a little, like a carnivorous plant, right? It's still a cute plant, even though it could eat like a fly, but not you. It's not going to eat you, but it's still like a plant that could eat, that like dangerous, like a Venus flytrap is dangerous, right? A little bit, not just pretty,
right?
Carnivorous. Yeah, I like it.
All right, let's move on to our next. You can see these lovely blue ropes. They're at these 4 corners. There are different offices, and that's where people line up to go and get their parking permits or whatever, pay their traffic ticket or whatever they do at City Hall. These ones are all plants, not flowers anymore, but the plant. The image from here was taken in Hawaii at a botanic garden, Allium Botanic Garden. It was a big path. I think this one and the Frond one I have later were taken there through just this very, very lush area. This one I kind of played with a little extra distortion in the middle, this kind of crystal ball thing here. I don't know, I thought it fit.
I like it too because it deviates, you know what I mean, just a little bit from the symmetry formula, so that it catches you like just a little bit, that you almost feel before you see it that there's something that's not perfectly symmetrical about it, and then it doesn't take a lot, but it changes a lot just to have that one thing decentered from that. So I think it's very effective. It doesn't disrupt any, the picture is incredibly balanced, but then when you get in the middle, your brain, it's a little bit of a brain puzzle, which I appreciate. It makes you look closer. And these fronds too, the same thing. They have that quality of not quite perfection, where even though you're looking at replication, it's still, it feels a little more wild than a strict, so but that you're saying is a quality of the plant. So that's where it's a collaboration. Right.
I'm not drawing these things. It's a digital collage, but I'm really augmenting those magazine clippings. I have control over them too.
Right.
This is an agave. I always like to talk about this piece in terms of this agave. My mother's yard, my parents' yard, my father was there also, has these blue agaves that have these giant, we always call them dragons, and they come out in winter time. So that was the name, was Agave Solstice, to commemorate that these agaves that would bloom around Christmas time, and tourist bus would actually come and stop across from our house, and they would take pictures of these things when they were blooming in certain years. So that was kind of fun. This one's a lot quieter. I think when I started moving to I don't know if they got quieter or not, but an agave is a quieter toned piece than a rose.
Right. I mean, I think all the greens, like you'd be hard pressed to make green feel, anxious or over emotional or something. Like green is a calming color to perceive. And so I feel like, again, in a collaborative spirit, like that's the energy of the palette. in the not florals, right? So you have that already, that minty, that slight freshness, that kind of,
Mhm.
yeah. So you have, that's going to be some of the emotional quality always in that palette. So that's really interesting though. I don't know
hadn't
if
thought of it that
I
way.
don't know
Thank
if
you.
quieter is the word, but I see why you would say that.
This once
Well,
again,
that's not quiet.
this one's not quiet. This is the, stop doing that. The this part around here, the kind of woody looking parts, is the spine of a palm frond lying on the ground. Here's where the leaves
Yeah, okay.
come off of the spine. And this one, I don't know. I like it too.
But it does, like that faded, everyone, you know,
Mhm.
everyone, but definitely everyone that lives in LA knows exactly what that sun bleached, almost bone-like thing that happens when a giant palm frond is on the ground and it starts to dry and weather in the sun, and it takes on that exact sort of splintery, bone gray kind of quality to it. Like you know, it's still very natural, even though it's, I mean, death is too strong a word, but obviously, you know, it has died. But it's still very organic. Yeah.
So this next set, this is my Fresh Harvest series. My husband and I are vegans. We go to the farmer's market a lot. And just some of the fun finds that I've found at the market. I decided to see if I could work my magic with that.
You had, spoiler alert, you can.
I can. I figured it out, right? But there's so many different things. They're harder edges. When the flowers have all of these sort of soft edges, and vegetables and fruits don't. So they created different challenges. This one here, I decided to do a repeating background. I had fun with that. This is the fingered citron, or the Buddha's hand, sitting on a tablecloth.
Those are so creepy. I mean, in real life, they're so creepy. But they're just citrus. But yeah, everything about them is so fascinating. And wow, you've really gone with the mystery of them to me.
I think it's still a little creepy.
It is a little creepy, which is so interesting in this context, for the creep factor to come in, you know? But again, the creepiness is inherent to that particular citrus. Like, it's a creepy fruit.
Yeah. We actually grew some, partially because I love I would buy some at the farmer's market. We were putting some trees in, and I grew one of them. And they're really great, but they attract these bugs and get all like mighty and icky, and so we got rid of it. And it wasn't worth it. Put kumquats in instead, something that we would eat. This I think might be my favorite from the series. This is a purple onion. The cross section of a purple onion, and it had, sometimes you'll get an onion and it has more than one bulb inside of the one bulb. And so this one was like that. It had just this sort of weird, I don't know, kind of T-shaped thing going on in it. And I just loved it and took photographs of it, and it became this.
Yeah. I mean, I do love that cross section idea is so interesting too, because it really doubles it relates in a different way to what you're already doing, right? Like, there's layering, but then the cross section is a different axis. So you get, you're looking down, you're doing a cross section, then you're replicating. So you're really conflating like the vertical and the horizontal. And I think, that's part of the reason that I see that this one, feels different. But again, that's the onion. And it's so funny because it looks like when you slice an onion. Like in a way, this is one of the most sort of straightforward ones. It's like that, we all know what that looks like. You slice that red onion and yeah, and like maybe there's a little baby one down here and you get the shapes and that sort of arabesque kind of, you know, shape. And it's very Fidelius to already the sort of fractal crazy qualities of the original vegetable. So it's weird, it's interesting to me that you're doing so much to manipulate and work with it, and yet in each case, in a different way, have been so honoring of the original existence of the thing.
I try.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And
vulvas are everywhere. I mean, there's even vulvas in the onions. I can't even stand it. Okay. All right.
Yeah, well, that's part of that bilateral symmetry. Again, if it has a curve and you make it go like this,
got a vulva.
There you go. This one is it's this yellow pepper that had all sorts of weird ins and outs and curly and twisted. Again, on a damask tablecloth. So the background is cloth. And this one I probably did a little extra stuff with that green border. I'm sure the pixels originally came from the stem, which is probably what is there, but I don't know. Somehow they got all stretched and looked like a ribbon, and I got to incorporate that in. I had fun making this one, and I had fun eating the pepper. It's very good. And so the final one that I'm showing of the vegetables and fruits, this was Satauma Sunshine. So tangerines, sort of another kind of winter, sun in the winter piece.
And you can really see the skin in the corner.
Particularly in the corners right up here.
Yeah.
And then whatever this is. Kind of look like almonds too. Okay.
That's so super.
So while I'm creating these pieces, I come up with layers and layers and layers, and not all of them make them into the piece. Some of them are just very beautiful all by themselves. And that's where the medallions came in, was just lots of layers that didn't make it into the final piece, but because they didn't balance right, or for some reason, they just didn't make it into the piece. Or some of these may have made it into the original piece, but that's the theory behind these. It just some fun stuff that I couldn't incorporate in a big array, but putting them out there I see them like as specimens. Again, sort of like botanic illustration.
Yeah.
Specimens.
And I think it's a great way to do it. I mean, I agree with you. I see, like, you know, you'd have to do more complexifying to make it one of your full pieces. And yet there's something about these where you were obviously motivated to kind of like stop in that process, but by collecting them in this way, and again, messing with the viewer on the symmetry, because each one is symmetrical, but the array are all different. You get a little bit of that push-pull back as well by grouping them that way. Yeah, like a sampler or something. Oh,
so we're still botanical, but we've gone to the ocean. You're pointing.
Because they're incredible, because these to me are unique in that these look like jewelry. These look like elaborate pieces of hand-worked jewelry from, you know, the Czar era. Like, that's what these look like to me. Like, is Jeff still here? JT Burke, go over. Like, to me, and that hasn't, you know, but there's something about these that really scream objects. It really looks like a discrete set of physical objects, and to me it has to be jewelry. And I haven't I haven't felt that with some of the other ones. I'm perfectly content with encountering what I'm looking at, and I'm not, I get it's botanicals, I'm understanding it, but there's something about this, and maybe it's just the palette, maybe it's the intensely fine level of tiny detail, but there is something about these that really scream objects to me.
You've given me a great idea for merchandise. I turn these into jewelry somehow. If I ever do, I'll give you one.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it might just be as simple as that clean gold and white gold palette. Maybe it's just that, but it really, wow.
So this is a close-up of one of those. On this one, I decided, I gave myself another rule on those here. There are 9 individual reflections, and each of them is the bigger one, and each of them is the interior one. And they're, again, puzzle piece. Try to figure out which ones go together best. So all the while I'm doing this, it's really, I'm playing games with myself. I'm making rules to follow or to break. You never know which. This one here is oyster mushrooms. I tried to make a whole piece of this one, a big, complete, multi-layered piece. It never worked. And so this was, I think, the first medallions that I did because they're just so beautiful. I mean, they remind me, I don't know, like sea anemones or some, they're just so beautiful, but they didn't work together.
Or something, like, is that the right word to use about oyster mushroom? But ghost, they do have that quality, that sort of apparitional kind of, yeah.
And then I think that's the end of my slides. I don't think I did another detail.
Well, that's perfect, because I have a couple questions and I'm sure people do too.
Sure.
I
see there are 18. There's 18 in the chat. So I don't know what's been going on.
Yes, well, most of them are people telling you how beautiful and brilliant and talented you are. So that's fine.
Thank you.
If somebody has an actual question, like I said, type it or, wave around. But I definitely have really enjoyed being able to deep dive into like the one piece at a time, because I think too, like, one of the things about the work is that it's really beautiful to be, confronted with an array of them, but each one has such depths and so many sort of, layers, no pun intended, because that's literally what you do. Yes. But it has them, and what you need is time in order to be able to kind of swim through them and unpack them and go behind and behind. And I think when, that's an argument for viewing work in person or whatever, is that ability to move up and move back and to see something from across the room and have it change as you approach it. And so I think that it's been great, at least I know for me, to be able to really like sink into each one of them and sort of talk a little bit about the unique qualities of each one within the idea of, your overall practice and your tools. I didn't realize till I just said that those words rhyme. Sorry. I wouldn't have made a rhyme on purpose. We have a question from Heather. Are you familiar with Laura Splan? I am not. That's obviously a question for Karen, but I just want to go on the record and say I'm not.
I'm not.
I saw her work through SciArt, and she does radial symmetry. And she ends up making these sort of, I think they're molecular structures into these doilies. They turn out to look like doilies. And I just thought you'd really enjoy looking at her stuff.
Cool.
I've written that down. I will check her out.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions that I did want to ask too, is about this, and some of the titles kind of hint at maybe what might be the answer, but there is, aside from the technical and the beauty, and there is this kind of like, you're not allowed, I don't know if you know this, but I'm professionally not allowed to use the word spiritual to describe contemporary art. But just to say, aside from the mandala-like quality, which is naturally going to evoke the mandala and that as being part of a meditation and spiritual practice, even in the West, when you look at something like what Carl Jung did with the mandalas as a meditation. So there is that quality of sort of an low-key Eastern mysticism to the aesthetic. And of course, there is a level where you're talking about the kind of fractal symmetries between the micro and the cosmic and everything in between, the building blocks of life and DNA, and what you're doing are, perceiving and following those same kinds of rules. And I feel like it's kind of unavoidable that there would be at least an esoteric dimension to that, being confronted with that kind of information. Is that something that you notice, cultivate, ignore, allow? Like, what's your relationship to that part of it?
Certainly notice. I'm not coming. I'm not coming from the woo-woo side, but I acknowledge that it's there, and that's woo-woo. So that's a little meta. I did come out of it. I did come into this through my Jewish faith, doing the 6-pointed figures. After doing 11 pieces, I had almost a calendar. So I got to the 12th piece, and it's getting a little tired of the 6-figured form. And I had this one reflection that I tried to put it in 6, and it just didn't work whatsoever. So it ended up being 4. So that was my cruciform piece, which was like really, that was creepy for a very long time. And I still have to think of it that way. That no, it's just a form. It's just a 4 shape. It's not it's not Jewish, but it's. So that was like kind of the first like.
I'm gonna make that my new Twitter bio. I'm not Jewish.
So no, I'm not coming to this from Eastern mysticism. I'm not coming to the mandala form from that. It's a lot. I'm coming from playing with a kaleidoscope as a kid. One of my favorite toys. I'd go around, and it had the little things where you could put the glitter inside of them and the beads, but then it also had the one that was just clear, and I'd go around and I'd play around with my mother's flowers and whatever was out there, and put.
Well, that's interesting.
And so I have a real fondness for the kaleidoscopic shape, from a again, a playing and a childhood sort of feeling. A lot of it just kind of, what erupts spontaneously and what has been building and building and building in playing around with these programs. Sometimes you hit the random button and you get all sorts of things. And I think I hit the random button once, and it gave me this whole corner of the program that worked with reflections and distortions. And I've just been exploiting that for the last 15 years.
I mean, I love that idea of the random button though too, because that is, again, that's one of those things that like tugs at the kind of, meaning that is kind of endemic in the form. So like when you look at those forms from nature and those fractal patterns, and that cannot, the spirals and the helixes and all the things that are naturally occurring from the cellular level to like, how galaxies form. And it can sometimes seem random, but it actually is following these rules. And I feel like, that is exactly what the situation you're describing would be. Like, you're in a finite universe of a program that has been written. So it can't do an infinite number of things, but there's still enough room inside of it for randomness. And so you get that push-pull, which I feel like is kind of what nature is in a way. Like you look at like the ocean and the way that the waves roll in, it just seems crazy. But of course, It doesn't take long to figure out that there's a pattern that it's following,
Mm-hmm.
and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think like that's one experience of nature, is to that moment where you realize there's a pattern at work. And so I feel like there's something of that makes it into the final. Vicky was saying that she finds this work very calming, and was wondering, is that part of what you're doing, is what she was saying. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, I think it's a more secular version of the woo-woo question, but it's like, is the process, and I said this before, I imagine it would be crazy making, because to me, the patience and attention to detail that's required is absolutely nightmarishly daunting. However, you seem to really enjoy it. So do you find it like calming in what I think is a counterintuitive way, or like, as you're moving through it?
There are levels of frustration in trying to get the balance correct, but I thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing. The little details, making sure that it's balanced just so, moving it a pixel this way or a pixel that way. That's just like, ooh. Yes, I find that calming. My husband could speak to whether or not it's crazy or I'm crazy. But in high school, geometry was my favorite subject, other than art. Art was my favorite. Geometry was my second favorite. Working with a compass, I guess that's the sacred geometry shape, is the circles that do the six-pointed. And man, that was that, and solving proofs. I loved solving proofs. I'm crazy.
Right. So when you get out of that whole beautiful mind thing, you would be in the rose garden. And now I understand everything you're doing. That's it. I got it. You're a geometry nerd. You love to solve puzzles with 40 kinds of rose bushes and fire cactuses in the yard.
Yep.
And here we are.
That's it. All right, we're done.
I love knowing that there's a personal narrative of meaning. It's not pure observation, that there's a level of this also that really speaks to your life story and your character beyond what we're observing as an aesthetic. So that is actually, all kidding aside, I think that's really incredible to realize that the roots, no pun intended, of this investigation is actually legitimately something that's been on your mind, like basically forever.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. That's pretty
There's another question here from Stevie.
Oh, yeah.
Have I thought about using light? Yes. One tool that I now have at my disposal is a laser. They call it a laser writer, but it's not a printer. It's a laser cutting machine. It does etching and cutting. And I've been working with acrylic that's been printed. And so some see-through aspects shining through is something I'm interested in. I also work some of these files into animations, and that is 100% light.
Just went, holy shit, because I'm like, can we go so that I can find one of these in an animation form and just spend the rest of the night staring at it? Like, that sounds.
Can you talk for a bit and I will look for something?
Yes, because I just want to say, like, that sounds so compelling, like, to be actually able to kind of somewhat engage with like a morphing version of that, I think would enhance both the organic and the digital aspects of it. Each would be amplified, right? You'd still have that balance, but it would just kick that up, because movement is going to feel organic, but the animated quality of it is absolutely going to feel like something, programmed. That is so incredible. I'm kind of like stuck on that now. I need that to happen.
We'll see how fast I can find something.
But yeah, because I think there's a quality, like an illusion of a little bit of movement that goes with all this. And I love that question, Stevie, because, you know, it already kind of halfway vibes like a light box because of the way the materials, right? So then the way that it's printed and mounted is, you know, I often, this was a long time ago, but everyone here I think is my age, so you'll understand that for a long time I would say that my favorite color was Sebachrome red. And the reason is because it wasn't just red. It was this particular red that manifested in photography in a particular way that really seemed to kind of carry its own inner light box with it or something. And even when it was on plain old paper, it just radiated and there was something about it. And I feel like a lot of your palette has that very light, exactly what Stevie said. It already kind of feels like it might be a light box already. And so I feel like anything that even augmented that would definitely increase the drama. And then it'll be for you to say if you enjoy the enhanced drama or if you prefer the old mystery or whatever. But I definitely understand why you would want to look at that because I feel like it's already kind of in there a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I found something.
Okay.
So
Movie time, y'all. Oh my God, we've been talking for an hour. How fun are we? Okay. Yeah, let's see this. I had no idea an hour had gone by. I could literally talk to you all day. All right. Oh, yeah.
This is a calla lily. So I've done several animations of showing basically how the layers come together to create a finished piece.
I love that. It has such, you know, it's this digital technology, but it has such an old school, like almost like Oscar Fischinger, like old timey hand animation. You know, he did all these way before he worked on Fantasia. He did all of these very avant-garde sort of cut, almost like stop motion, but two-dimensional kind of, you know, flickering shapes, animated films, and things kind of swirl in and drop into place. And this is almost has a little bit of the soul of that, but then it's this other thing. Wow, that's pretty cool. Thank you for doing that. That's pretty cool.
We've definitely talked about Jennifer Steinkamp with her work too.
Yeah, and the thing about Jennifer is she had to write that code or get someone to do it for her. It did not exist. So you forgive a lot of the pixelations and the glitchiness of it because you knew that it was basically brand new technology, right? Whereas now we've all come to expect, you know, that everyone can launch a spaceship from their phone or whatever.
Uh-oh, don't get Karen any ideas.
No. My programming knowledge is minimal. I didn't start early enough, or have the right teachers or whatever. I'm too old, I think is what I'm trying to say.
You're never
I'm not. It's just I'm too old to that have been part of my curriculum as I was growing up. I'm not too old to learn things. Anyway.
Right. Just it wasn't invented to be taught when we were still in school.
Correct.
Right.
My younger brother was of the age that, you know, working in the guts of computers at the very, you know, I missed it probably by about 4 or 5 years. But that's okay.
I missed it too. My sister is, yeah, exactly.
No,
I think I kind of remember learning like MS-DOS, and you would like, you'd spend half an hour, and then you'd hit the button, and the computer would like have learned your name, and then that was your half hour of your life, and you're like, what did I just learn? Right.
I remember that in 1984, when the Macintosh computer came out, I got one. I really haven't looked back since then.
Okay. That's
and
good.
it came with, or the guy I bought it from had also was working with Microsoft. So he the software he gave me with it had Mac Draw and Mac Write, but then I also got Microsoft Basic. So I learned a little bit of programming with Microsoft Basic, and it was very clunky, and I'd forgotten everything about it. And then HyperCards came in. Does anyone remember HyperCards?
Nope.
Nope. That was a Macintosh thing. Yeah, or you could get like weird little, again, modular programming stuff. And
I mean, I remember floppy disks and, you know, all that nonsense.
right.
So.
400K discs for $10. Remember those?
400K. Holy wow.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, probably each one of your images is like a terabyte at this point, right?
We're in the realm of gigs, but
okay.
But actually,
right,
no, yeah, I don't know.
I think
Different ones
really,
are different.
really,
They're about a gigabyte usually.
yeah, I think a gigabyte, that'll do it. All right, that's substantial enough. That is fantastic. Let me make sure we're not, can you talk a bit about the presentation? Oh yeah, Aline wanted to know, and then we'll start wrapping it up at the other end of this, but this is actually a thank you, Aline, because this was a question I had too. She asked about the presentation, and I agree with that, because these ones that we saw are definitely on the aluminum, which definitely lends to that luminosity just within the materials. But then at MOA, we saw the ones that were made on scrolls, and that had a really amazing physicality to it. And so maybe you just talk a little bit about exactly. So maybe, yeah, that's a great question.
So my screen comes up, right? These are my fabric pieces. The actually, what I was showing was not photographs of pieces that were printed. These are like the actual files that I'm working at. So when I'm working on the piece, it is on the computer. It has light shining through it, coming out at me from the screen. And I've tried printing on paper. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago. The metallic papers were not any, there was no such thing as metallic paper. Print on paper, and a lot of the gloss, it would go away. All of my bright, shiny stuff would go away. So I started, the printer I was using started having acrylic, so like laminated to the back of acrylic. And that was pretty damn good. God, they're heavy. These things are so damn heavy. And it was like 1/4-inch thick acrylic with a frame on the back to hold it up. It was like crazy. And then they started offering aluminum. So I got one of those as a sample and just kind of fell in love. It's light. It looked the closest to what I see on the screen. It was shiny. There's some issues trying to hang them, particularly in a building that's lit by sunlight and fluorescent and really bright. And so where they're hanging right now, you always have to deal with reflections. But the fact that I could get them to look so bright and shiny, close to what I had on the computer was why I've stuck with aluminum printing. There's some drawbacks to aluminum. The edges get ratty. So if you go to Alhambra, you'll notice that I have framed them all now, and they look even better. So framed aluminum is like really, really cool. But as far as these banners, the fabric, my grandmother taught me to sew. I sewed all my clothes as a child. I've made capes and jester hats for my kids when they were young, and for other kids I sold them and things like that. So this is my maker background. Again, with the Judaic, I was making prayer shawls. So I had been doing some custom printing on silk back when it was a brand new technology. And it was that whole project was way too expensive in monetary terms and time. And that's kind of what led me then into working 2-dimensional pieces. So now I'm kind of coming back full circle and putting it, taking it out of the computer and bringing it into an actual physical thing. And again, with this one, my new laser cutter, I have all sorts of different elements to my pieces that involve the laser and then adding the animation. So I end up now with these kind of installations rather than just creating a piece. I'm creating sort of a whole thing.
Nice.
And that's been kind of
We'll
fun.
have to check in with you again then when that's ready, when it's time for movies and sculptures.
Well, and I know that I'm a member of Tag Gallery, and I have a show scheduled sometime probably November-ish, October, November. It was
Okay.
supposed to be, all the dates got squished. And as long as we're not all quarantined again, and I think I will kind of, I have some ideas of what I'm going to be doing for this show that I haven't even started yet. But come see me at Tag if we're not quarantined in November.
Perfect. Yay. I will. No, we should. I mean, like I said, you know, and again, it's a whole other thing, but I do feel fairly confident, like for once, the art world is going to be the lucky ones because the truth of the matter is, like I said, I went to a few galleries in the last couple of days, and once you get past, you know, gratitude for buildings that leave the door propped open so you don't even have to touch the doorknob. Every gallery in there had hand sanitizer. But the thing is, once you get in there and you're alone in the gallery, that's very similar to what it's always just like to go to a gallery. So I think that we might, like I said, for once, we might be the lucky ones where we actually kind of, you know, do get to kind of keep working and keep showing. And yeah, it's weird that only 2 people will be able to see it at a time and, you know, no wine bar, but it should
like
be.
that idea.
But because galleries are kind of, because of the way they are physically, I think we actually have a chance of them, you know, being able to still make presentations. So although in general, I don't feel particularly optimistic, I choose to remain optimistic about art stuff, including can't wait to come see your show with just one other person in October. No, I'm serious though. I think we
I'll
might
cross our fingers that I get to actually put it up on the wall.
Yeah, I think you will. You know, I hope to, like everyone hopes, but I feel like we have a slight, like I said, for a change, the art world has a little bit of an advantage here.
Well, from your mouth, right?
Well, it's mostly because I need to sit and watch one of those animations for like an hour. So it's really just what I want, which is to do that.
I'll make sure. I might have some of. I've got stuff on Vimeo and YouTube. You can search my name, and there are some things up there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So great. It was wonderful listening to both of you talk about your work. Thank you so much. There were no other questions or anything in chat. No, there was a lot talked about, and I'm so glad you brought up geometry. I was like waiting for that, and I was going to say something about you and math. You did it. You said
earlier.
It there.
I got to bring it out earlier. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my lead.
We'll talk.
I was a math geek in high school.
Yeah.
I was that girl.
Start with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Shana, so much. This has been really wonderful.
What a pleasure.
It's really great. Awesome to see everybody.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us here. And tell all your friends it's on Facebook. They can archive. They can come back and watch it.
If it records. This is the first time we're doing this, so hopefully it'll record okay.
It says live on Facebook on my thing, so it better, because otherwise I would have recorded it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
When has technology ever failed anyone?
Oh,
exactly.
Gee, well.
All righty.
Okay, bye, ladies.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been really
Have a great
wonderful.
weekend.
Thank you, Shana.
Oh,
Thank you,
Karen. Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to make sure I save all this chat here.
Yep. Oh, yeah, save the chat.
Hurry up before I end the meeting.
All right. And I guess I'll see you, Christine, tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, 11
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Thank you all.